Hi, Mrs. Jones.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Welcome to the conference.
Thanks.
Okay, so today we are going to be talking about Emily
Mm-hmm.
and how she's been doing this first grade year. So we met in the fall, and we kind of went over some of the assessments, but now that we're in the spring, she's been tested quite a bit, so we have a lot of our assessments are done in the fall, in the winter, and the spring. So she's had testing over the winter, and then some testing just these past couple of weeks for the spring. So first of all, before we start, I would like to say that Emily is just a pleasure to have in class. She's always ready to learn. She's eager. She gets along well with other children, and she's just wonderful.
Thank you.
So today we are going to be looking at a number of different scores for a number of different assessments that Emily has taken.
Okay.
And these are all based around reading and literacy. And then one of ours is word knowledge and spelling, which obviously plays into reading and how she's doing with reading. So what I would like to do is give you some background on the assessment and then show you her scores and then kind of talk about those scores and talk about what needs to be done potentially and what has been done to help her keep progressing.
Okay.
So the first assessment that we're going to talk about is the FAST assessment, and this is a universal screening process, and it's typically administered to kindergarten through third graders. And it's made up of 12 different subsets. So there's 12 different tests that that students are assessed on, and are 12 different topics, I guess, when it comes to reading and literacy that they're tested on. But students are typically given 4 of those in the fall, the winter, and the spring. So instead of testing them on all 12 in the fall, winter, and spring, we only test them on 4.
Okay.
And typically those are the ones where we think they might need the most work, or the ones that are kind of right for that grade level.
Okay.
And these tests only take 5 to 10 minutes, so they're very short. The purpose of the FAST assessment is to best match reading skill development and reliably assess risk. And the reports provide profiles of student strengths and weaknesses or difficulty, I guess, relating to literacy, and then can provide useful information to plan instruction. So these tests have given me some idea of Emily's strengths and weaknesses, and then I can take those findings and say, okay, well, I know that she's strong in this area, so I'm going to target this area. So they help me plan my instruction, and that is helpful when I have all the students' data, because then I can plan whole class lessons and help meet all of their needs.
Okay.
So how the FAST is scored, there is a set score for each grade level, for each subset, and those are the different tests that I was telling you about. And the given score represents the lowest score that a student can receive in order to be determined proficient. And then if they're below that, they are considered below or at risk. And we call those scores target scores. So as I told you earlier, students are typically tested on 4 subsets only in the fall, winter, and spring. And we have a variety of different ones. Emily was tested on sight words, word segmenting, nonsense words, sentence reading, the FAST CBM, and then the early reading composite. Sight words is a subset that assesses the student's ability to recognize. In first grade, it's 150 of the most high-frequency words, and they must be able to recognize those words automatically and not use any kind of strategy to figure out what the word is. So that would be words like about, after, again, also, another, back, and because. So those words, we just want them to automatically be able to read and not have to use a strategy. And then word segmenting is a subtest that assesses the student's ability to separate a spoken word into individual sounds. So those individual sounds or phonemes are the smallest unit of sound in the spoken language. So if we look at the word sun, we know that it's S-U-N or S-N. So we look at how they're able to break up a word into those individual sounds. For nonsense words, this is a subtest that is, it assesses the ability to read phonetically regular words. So this subtest assesses whether students can decode, which basically means translating the print into those sounds, and read them fluently. So examples of these words would be like mog, fim, fum. So words that don't necessarily make sense, but we want them to be able to use those sounds to read them correctly.
Okay.
And then sentence reading. So the sentence reading assesses the student's reading rate and accuracy, which is time and words correct. So how fast they're reading and how many words they're getting correct when they're reading. And again, it's just passages of different sentences. So it might be, the boy went to the park with his family. So we see, it might be the whole story about the boy going to the park, and we see how fast she's reading that within the minute and how accurate she's reading it.
Okay.
And then the FAST CBM is the curriculum-based measurement for reading. And this is just a way to screen and monitor student progress. And a teacher listens to a student read aloud from a grade level passage for 1 minute, and then we record those errors.
Okay.
And then the early reading composite scores were developed to predict end of year broad reading achievement in kindergarten or first grade. And the composite is generated based on weighted scores of a bunch of the different tests.
All right.
I know that was a lot. Hopefully that's making some sense. You will get this handout at the end,
Okay.
so you'll kind of have an idea of what these are whenever you want to look at them, and then you can compare from grade to grade.
Okay.
So here we have a chart of Emily's FAST assessment. So here we have the different subsets that she was scored on, or assessed on. So again, the sight words, the word segmenting, nonsense words, sentence reading, CBM, and that early reading composite. The number in the parentheses represents the target score that I told you about. So if she falls below, we know that she is below or at risk. And then if she is above, then we consider her proficient for that skill or subtest. So when we look at sight words, the cutoff in the fall was a 14, and Emily scored a 13.
Okay.
So I highlighted it orange because she's right there. She was so close to meeting that target score. And with some small group intervention with sight words, and we also do some large group or whole class intervention with sight words. We kind of go through them every day.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to get her to a 49 with a cutoff of 44.
Good.
And then this spring, she did tremendously well with a 77 and the cutoff being a 61.
Good.
So we went from a 13 to a 77, which is tremendous progress. And word segmenting was next, and the cutoff was a 27, and she scored a 20. So she was considered below and at risk.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with some small group intervention, we were able to get her up to a 34 with a cutoff of a 30. So again, progression.
Mm-hmm.
And then she scored another 34 in the spring with a cutoff of a 32.
Good.
So there we're kind of getting close to that point of being just above proficient
Mm-hmm.
and close to being below. So we'll continue to work with word segmenting, and then hopefully she'll just continue to progress with that skill. So for nonsense words, she did phenomenal in the fall. She got a 19 with a cutoff of 5. And then she actually dropped down to a 15 with a cutoff of 4, with a cutoff of 14, excuse me. And then in the spring, she jumped back up to a 38 with a cutoff of 17. So there isn't a lot of concern with the nonsense words. We knew in the winter that she was close to that cutoff, but we knew with some more work in the spring we should be able to get her there, and we did. For that, the CBM reading, which is the curriculum-based measurement for reading, the cutoff was a 68, and she scored a 30. And then she was not in the spring, again, with some small group intervention and some one-on-one intervention as well. We were able to get her up to a 94 with a cutoff of 68. So again, we just saw tremendous progress from that 30 to a 94. So that's awesome. And even though, and the cutoff score stayed the same. So to see her jump from a 30 to a 94 shows great progress. And hope that she'll continue to progress. And then for the early reading composite, this cutoff was a 28, and she scored right at 28. So we're happy about that. But with that, again, we're sitting on that line of, okay, she's right at proficient, but she could easily fall back and become below or at risk. So, and again, this is taken from the compilation of a bunch of the tests off of the weighted system for that. And then in the winter it was 37, and she scored a 36. So again, right below, but close. And then in the spring it was a 51, and she scored a 64. So again, we saw some progress. So overall, we'll continue to work with Emily on her sentence reading, and she'll more than likely be assessed on that during the fall of her second grade year. And then since the scores for her subtests, which were these again, have seen tremendous progress, and she has passed each of them, is it likely that she'll be assessed on new subsets subtests, in the fall.
Okay.
So since she has reached proficient on all of these with pretty high numbers, other than that word segmenting, they'll more than likely start to look at some different subtests for her. Like I said, there were 12 out of all of these. So, and every now and again, she'll probably be tested for these again just to see where she's at, and they'll go from there. So, do you have any questions about
I don't think so.
Okay,
no.
Good. So we'll continue on. So the next assessment is the DSA, which stands for the Developmental Spelling Assessment.
Okay.
So this is looking at not only spelling, but word knowledge and usage of words. So every component of words is compiled into this assessment. So it is based on word knowledge and word study. It's broken up into 4 different stages, and each of the stages includes 5 different features. So it kind of gets a little bit confusing, but I'll do my best to explain. And the 5 different features become the focus of that stage. So students are given an oral spelling test based on the stage that they are in that has words that focus on the stage's features, and the assessments are then scored. So when I say oral spelling test, the students get a sheet with the number 1 through, let's say, 20 or 25, and then I would say the word is dog, and then I would give them a sentence. The dog went to the park, and then I'd repeat the word. So you say the word, give a sentence, and then repeat the word.
Okay.
So just kind of your traditional spelling test is what students have, and then they're scored. And the purpose of the DSA is to assess students' word knowledge and spelling skills. This includes word study and working with different parts of the words, so the vowels, the consonants, etc. And this assessment is used to place students in the proper word study group and determine any needs or problem areas to better instructional decisions. So again, we use this assessment to know strengths and weaknesses, what students need to work on, and then what we can do as educators and as teachers to plan our instruction to meet those students' needs.
Sure.
Scoring details. So if a student receives a 12 or above for their stage score, 25 is the highest, then they will move on to the next stage, or the next set of tests. And again, there are 4 different stages.
Okay.
So in the first stage, if Emily were to score a 12 or above, then she would move on to the next stage. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then when a student receives a 3 or below on a feature score, so it's broken up into stage score and feature score. So they get a score for each feature, and then they get a total composite score for the stage, because the features are embedded within the stage.
Okay.
And a 3 or below basically tells us that some kind of intervention, whether that be as a large group, if the whole class is performing low, or a small group, then we'll go from there. So we are going to take a look at the DSA scores for Emily now. So she was assessed in the letter name stage and the within word stage. So we have letter name would be the first stage, and then within word is the second stage, and then we have syllable juncture is the third, and then differential constancy is the fourth stage. And these are kind of broken up into grade level. So in the letter name stage, students develop an understanding of the alphabetic principle, so that that basically means that a link exists between letters and sounds. So this stage assesses initial and final consonants. So the initial consonants are the ones that are found at the beginning of the word, and then the final consonants are the ones found at the end of the word. Short vowels, initial consonant blends, and digraphs, affricates, and final consonant blends and digraphs.
Okay.
And then with the within word stage, students begin within word pattern stage when they can spell out most one-syllable short vowel words. This stage assesses long vowels, our controlled vowels, other common long vowels, complex consonants, and abstract vowels. So I know a lot of that is probably some of the things you probably know, but some of them are probably a little bit confusing. But just know that they all fall within spelling and how the words are produced and things like that.
Okay.
So like I said, she was assessed on letter name, in the letter name stage, and then within word. I'm very pleased with her progress for these.
Good.
The letter name test is one that is typically given in kindergarten, so it's no surprise that she surpassed those cutoff scores.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see, so 8 was the cutoff in the fall, it was the cutoff in the winter and in the spring. So 8 is what we want them to reach by the end of the year.
Okay.
So that's why this number stays the same, whereas with the FAST it was different for each benchmark. But for this one, we wanted her to be at an 8 or above before the end of the school year.
Okay.
And like I said, the letter name test is typically given to kindergartners, but we gave it to her in first grade, and she got a 16, a 19, and a 21. So she only kept progressing, but she was well above the cutoff every time. And then, the within words tests are typically given in first and second grade. So meeting these benchmark scores for her are very important. We want her to meet that 8 by the end of the year. So she did receive a 4 in the fall, which is lower than the benchmark of 8, but it's with that 4, I was pretty certain that by the end of the year, we'd be able to get her to that point of making an 8. And she did. So she has now surpassed the benchmark score with a score of 16, which is wonderful. So that is above a 12. So she will be able to move on to the syllable juncture stage. So again, with work in the within word features, which was the long vowels, the R-controlled vowels, other common long vowels, complex consonant and abstract vowels, both in small and large group settings, we were able to finally help Emily reach that benchmark goal. So a lot of our interventions, when I say intervention, I guess that just means typically small group instruction. So we typically have groups of students that are performing at about the same level. We might have 1 or 2 students. I think in Emily's case, we had 3 or 4 other students that were kind of performing at the same level as her. So we're able to group those students together, work with them one-on-one, and in that small group on those specific features.
Good.
And then that way the kids that aren't struggling with those features are getting the intervention that they need on the features they need to work on.
Sure.
So that small group instruction is really, really important to helping our students meet those benchmark scores.
Okay.
And that is all that we have for Emily. So I am going to give you this whole handout.
Okay.
So again, it just has the name of the assessment, and then a little bit more about what Emily was tested on specifically, and then her scores. And then I have also written up a summary of those scores, basically everything that I just told you, but just so you have it to share with your husband if you want, or others, I guess, what she scored and what that means, and the interventions that have taken place.
Okay.
Now, for Emily, we honestly don't have to do a lot of intervention. There are a few areas where we've worked just to get her to that benchmark score, but we have seen nothing but progression, which gives us hope that she will continue to be a strong reader and she will continue to do well.
Great.
So is there any questions before we wrap up?
Okay, so thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.